Hello and welcome to this presentation. It's entitled On the Operation of Creation and the Virgin Birth. I gave this presentation in July 2013 here in Canberra, and I hope you enjoyed this. I re-recorded it, or actually recorded it now for the first time, rerunning through this presentation. I hope you enjoy it. It's a bit different, and certainly a bit of mind shifting that I expect will occur during this next 20 minutes or so. First, we have to, of course, acknowledge that the operation of creation is only of the divine. And there is only one God, one divine, one being, one true source of which we all have our existence. As we can read in Revelation, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and last, the beginning and the end. So this is very much a Christian perspective, of course, but coming from that, I can say my belief system is there is only one God, and under that premise we will continue. The word and creation, of course, interesting that we read, people might gloss over, is that God does not change. We'll read that in Malachi. And also that the Lord, that God, that Jehovah God is the Word, we can read in John. So as we progress through this presentation, it will become clear why I focus on the divine as the Word, and why I highlight the fact that the divine, the Creator, does not change but is a constant. Of course, the traditional Christian view that we've often been portrayed is one of a creator that sits outside of creation, and then creation lets creation run its own course and has no further thing to do with it, in essence, apart from interacting with those that might call upon him. And of course, the Creator has been given all sorts of human characteristics, emotions and feelings, etc., that we feel ourselves, and we therefore look upon the divine as being as human as we are ourselves, with all finite flaws from that on, and to consider him from a position of time and space in which we have our existence. We know very clearly from scientific thinking that in quantum physics that there is clearly a need for a conscious observer for reality to exist, and for this reality to have a basis of its existence. In other words, without having a mind or without thought, in fact there is no reality but only potential. But we'll have a look at this brief video which explains on how we interact with our senses in this world. We have been taught that the process of seeing is when light clusters, called photons, travel from an object to the eye, then pass through the eye, where they are refracted and focused on the retina at the back of the eye. Here, these light rays are turned into electrical signals and transmitted by neurons to the center of vision at the back of the brain. We now know that the opposite is true, that the act of seeing actually takes place in the visual cortex in the brain. All the images we view in our lives and all the events we experience actually take place in this tiny dark area of our brain. Both the film you are now watching, as well as the boundless landscape that you can see as you gaze into the distance to the horizon, actually take place in your mind. These physical, scientific facts make us come to an indisputable conclusion. Everything we see, touch, hear, and perceive as matter is actually no more than electrical impulses experienced in our brain. So that video is taken from another presentation, a video called The Holographic Universe, and this is taken from that as well. And this little snapshot, this little picture explains how through quantum physics some of the scientists are actually looking at the operation of our senses and how the world exists. In essence, they describe it as having some kind of single origin that projects an image that we can then observe and reproject as reality. So what it says there, our human brain receives wave frequencies from the field, translates them into particles by collapsing the wave function, and projects the results out there, and then processes the inputs that come back through our own sensory perceptions. There's a few interesting quotes from some leading scientists in this field. Now, and these are only just a few that I've taken, because there are a plethora of views out there that pretty much confirm, and all you need to do is just have a look and research where science actually is pointing, although they're trying very, very hard to stay to the traditional view of the material world being independent. It's very clear that science is acknowledging that the world and reality as we see it is very, very different than we are led to believe. So this is from Karl Pribram, a neurophysiologist at Stanford University, who wrote The Languages of the Brain. He worked with David Bohm as well, very famous. And he says, our brain mathematically constructs hard reality by relying on input from a frequency domain. So they're explaining the domain of consciousness here as a frequency domain. Descartes also explained that as a domain of consciousness, and the domain of externals as being a separate domain. So they're trying to come up with this new language to describe it. So Karl says, the objective world as we know it does not exist. It is a secondary reality. Fred Alan Wolf, a theoretical physicist as well, very famous, he says, there is no out there, independent of what is happening in here. Quantum physics is very, very clear on the fact that, of course, there is no external reality without a conscious effect, a conscious mind, i.e. thought about what is happening. So in that sense, we are actually shaping the reality ourselves. And Lynn McTaggart, who wrote The Field, she wrote, we are our world. There is no place where we end and everything else begins. So that's just a small selection of quotes from some leading thinkers in the world out there. Going back a few years, not as far back as Descartes, but in the early 1700s, Emanuel Swedenborg, a very famous scientist at the time, and philosopher, and Advent Christian, he wrote, all the things which are created reflect the human in some respect. And also, we could not think or intend if there were no agent, no substance as a source and focal point of thought and intent. So he very clearly explains that there has to be a single agent, a single source of where all reality comes from. Anything we may imagine happening apart from a substantial agent is nothing. So he says in reality there is nothing outside that exists independently of something else. All of our sensory life belongs not to the body, but to the spirit. So he also says, our spirit is really who we are. Our mind is really who we are. So if we go back to that original graphic, the diagram, where they try and explain in simple language how holographic, terms, how it would operate if we project a reality outside of ourselves. By the simple terms that they use in terms of how a hologram actually operates via laser projecting through a two-dimensional image to project something in 3 dimensions. Now, overlaying that with the knowledge that we have, we can say, okay, if there is a single reality, which would be the divine, the creator, then the actual field or the source of information would be the heavens, or all the minds that we have there that feeds into our mind, so which we can then receive it as an individual, and then project that experience outward. So from a single source, which is diffracted, received by influx, and then projected. So if we go to David Bohm, and he wrote Thought as a System. So he writes, the tangible reality of our everyday lives is really a kind of illusion, like a holographic image. Underlying is a vast, more primary level of reality. And he also says, what I mean by thought is the whole thing. He says thought, felt, the body, the whole society sharing thoughts, it is all one process. And that's just fascinating that people come up with that kind of thinking, which has not been disputed. In fact, all of scientific, progress since then really starting to confirm what they're talking about. So if we go back to Swedenborg, he talks about things in correspondences, and the fact that the spiritual world has its reality and is the source of which everything in our natural world has its cause. And he writes the following 2 things. All things in the spiritual world that appear before the eyes and other senses are correspondences. Animals from thoughts, birds from their affections. All who are in that world know that they are correspondences, for they know to what affections and thoughts they correspond. And he also writes, from this origin all things are created and formed, not only in the spiritual world, but all things in the natural world also. For the natural world exists and subsists from the Lord by the medium of the spiritual world. So it basically says that everything has its creation from the divine by the nature of the thoughts and affections, the diversity that are diffracted through the spiritual communities that are shown up in all the animals and all the world around us. So how does that work then? Because we know, that if the spiritual world is obviously not material, so how does that relate? Well, the way it relates, if we put a diagram amongst it, is that we have a creator, a divine source, a single being of which all life has its existence, which has the attributes of divine love and wisdom, so the affections and truth, and that then comes down through all the angelic communities, through the minds of those angels there, as they progress closer and closer towards a natural level of way of thinking. Now we have people that are purely operating in thought on a natural level, and therefore projecting this natural world in which they have their existence. And on the opposite side, you have the people that are not so willing to accept what is true and a bit more focused on their own self as thinking, which you would call, in a Christian terms, you would call the hellish communities. And they have their influx as well in the spiritual world, which all impacts on the people here through thought and affections. And so the reason why we can't actually experience the reality in which we find ourselves, but in the world of appearance, can be found in Genesis, where it says, "So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept," and never wakes up. We're in a world of appearance. Gurdjieff says a similar thing. He says man is asleep. And Albert Einstein, I like this quote, "Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one." So this is in Swedenborgian terms what you'd call influx. So and explains where our thoughts and affections come from, and that in this world, while we are operating in the world of appearances, in this natural world, we have our minds open through this influx, and we have choice. We're kept in this kind of balance between these two worlds to receive, both good thoughts and negative thoughts, and good affections, positive affections, caring affections, and selfish affections. And are kept in a state where we have choice to either follow one path or another. So, what about Jesus' birth? Now, times, which are the properties of nature in this world, are pure states of mind in the spiritual world, which states appear progressive there, because angels and spirits are finite. It follows, therefore, that in God they are not progressive, because he is infinite, and the infinities in him are one. And from this it follows that the divine essence in all time is himself devoid of time or progression. So the divine never changes. The divine is a constant. The only reason why we experience time is because we are in a state of progression. So if we go back to this influx that we were talking about, how the divine operates through influx via the heavens, then first one point about the need for the divine to come and what happened at his birth. Well, Swedenborg describes that in that time the world was so devoid of anything good that the people that were in here in the lower hells actually starting to come in and take over, and even the lowest of heavens, the most gentler angels, I suppose is just a way to describe it, were overtaken by these more selfish spirits, these selfish minds. And that then effectively blocked the influx, the positive influx to come via the heavens, creating a necessity for the Lord to bypass that and come directly via Mary. Because if there's no space, there's no time, we're talking about an influx of the mind. A state of being. Through that, the Lord is born and projected himself. Basically, through Mary, he conceptualizes a tangible, finite form of himself in operation, a state of being which is shared with all the people that have their experience in this world here. As we know, the divine is non-local, non-temporal and perfect, perpetual and constant. But our perception is imperfect, and so while perpetual, we are not in a constant state. And that's why this was allowed to happen. And this is how we can actually receive the divine itself as well. Through the innocence, we can actually receive the divine. And this, what happened then in that state where the divine operated, he was unable to put himself in a position where he was not fully the divine, taking on his human from Mary. And with that, the frailties, I suppose, the imperfection, the finality at the time that comes with that, allowing the influx through these devilish spirits to come in and therefore battle them in temptation and set his mind straight. Now, in Proving God, Edward Sylvia writes the following: wives in heaven are spiritually formed to receive and be impregnated by their husband's understanding, and his ideas are spiritual seed. The wife then brings these ideas into the spiritual world by giving life to those ideas through new forms of love, which add new spiritual qualities and happiness to the lives of both partners. Spiritual offspring are the things generated from this union, such as increased love and service to the heavenly community. Physical things can take on an organic form because love, which is a living force, adapts information to its own disposition. One's level of understanding is the real embodiment of his/her love. Thoughts, loves and values are more than real substances. They generate entirely new organic structures with new sensitivities. So we know that the divine is love itself. The divine is life itself. And through the mind of the divine creating all these different aspects, the different affections, the different qualities, which is what we are. And in that way, we are being constantly renewed, recreated by being able to receive the divine truth, the new spiritual understanding, and by the affection that we have for that. So if we look at Mary in terms of correspondence, Mary is actually the pure affection for truth, the ability to receive the divine. And Jesus is the divine truth. Now initially as man, as finite being, he represents truth but clothed in impure ideas, very much like what we are, except that we are not the truth. We have an ability to receive the truth, but we are not the truth. That's a big, big difference. And as that truth then is given form, and he glorifies his human form, he actually becomes the perfect living understanding. In other words, wisdom itself, or in other words again, is the word unencumbered. And as the written word, it represents obscured understanding and to be given life by its recipients. So you can look at the Bible as being the divine truth, but being obscured, and we need to be able to accept that as of ourselves through our own understanding and give that life, following a similar but very different path as the glorification of the Lord while he was on earth. And moving away from that distinction, the separation in terms of spatial awareness, in terms of putting the heavens higher and the hells lower and having that spatiality in there, because there is no space. And there is only an appearance of space according to the affinity of thoughts and affections. You can look at the divine, that everything is in the divine because it's all part of the divine life itself. The divine mind. And we form part of that but we have our own reality that we create because of the state of mind that we have. And we can either choose a positive, selfless, useful approach, or a more selfish or very negative state of mind whereby we're just looking after our own interest and trying to lord and rule it over others. And those that are living in the appearance of the natural world that haven't progressed to that level yet, which is like a breeding or training ground in which we are in that freedom to get the influx from both these areas. Collectively, this world that we live in and the appearance of it is a representation of our collective state of mind. So it's a shared environment. While in the spiritual world, Swedenborg is very clear that the world around us, the environment around us, very directly reflects our quality at the time, immediately. So we see birds, that means something in our mind. We see some trees and flowers, that reflect something in our mind. Very immediate. In this world, it is not immediate because it doesn't represent just my mind, but it represents the collective. But my observation of it and the way I receive that and look at the world, that then can be very clearly related to my quality, the quality of my mind, the quality of my state of being. So in reality, it's all about the quality of your mind and your state of being that will allow you to have a certain level of happiness or not, and how you experience life. And ultimately, that quality all comes from the divine. All good and all true has its origin, and all life has its origin in the divine. And that is how we are in Him and He is in us. Now, just a few points to take away from this presentation. 1, there is no time and space in reality. They are an appearance that are really experience. So even though they don't exist in reality, our experience is real. There is no creation apart from Jehovah God, nor us. There is no out there. So we are an intrinsic part of creation, an agent through which creation occurs. So the creation of the natural world, and the creation of the world, the experience of the world around us, because we are finite. That's why we have the experience of time and space. The third point, Jesus did not exist apart from Jehovah God, nor us, then and now. God does not change. We are in Him and He is in us. He is the I am and only true being which exists independently. We live in a constant state of experiencing appearances. And the last few points. We have a common experience or a shared perception of reality, insofar we share a common frequency or affection for what is good and true. We appear to one another only on account of receiving affection for truth and the application of it from the human being similarly tuned. Our mind and spirit are one and the same thing. We are our mind. It's very clear that we are not our body. So our mind is who we really are. And the last point I want you to take away is that all effects originate from the spiritual level. Everything that appears to us is representative and caused by correspondence from the spiritual. That's where reality finds its origin. Well, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and it's given you a bit of food for thought. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may you find something stimulating in this presentation to apply and better your life. Thank you.